All right, so welcome. This is the AGIC Natural Resources Winter Presentation Series. I'm excited to have you join us today. This is the third presentation series meeting that we've hosted, and they seem to be very successful. So I hope that you get a lot out of this afternoon. Today's focus is going to be on drought and hydrology in the Southwest. I wanted to share just a little bit of information about our natural resources work group in case you were interested in joining us for our regular meetings and helping us achieve our annual goals. It's a collective effort. So the natural resources work group, their mission generally is to facilitate geospatial data sharing and tools to support natural resources work across Arizona. Because it's the Arizona Geographic Information Council that hosts this group, everything has a geospatial focus. The group provides a forum for geospatial information exchange that will enhance and support government, tribal, private, and nonprofit natural resource efforts through coordination and identification of cost sharing opportunities, resulting in more work done on the ground. So, you know, we have a pretty big vision, and with the help of all of our generous volunteers, we make a pretty big impact in Arizona. So thank you again for joining us. Our lineup today is absolutely spectacular. We have 3 different groups of folks that are going to do presentations for us, and we're going to start it off with Susan Craig and Nick Carroll from ASU's Kyle Center for Water Policy at Morrison Institute. Just a couple of housekeeping things before I introduce them. If you would make sure you're on mute, and we'll let the folks that are presenting be the only ones with their camera on and presenting at the same time. So I'll moderate questions that you may have. Please put them in the chat, and we'll wait until the end of the presentations to ask those. But I would encourage you to interact. That's the beauty of our virtual platform, right? So without any more ado, I am excited to introduce Susan Craig and Nick Carroll. Susan is a water policy analyst at the Kyle Center. She drives projects on water resilience, and she has worked at 3 primary state water agencies, the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, Arizona Department of Water Resources, and Water Infrastructure Finance Authority. That's a lot. It's huge. So Susan has extensive knowledge because of all of that experience in the state's water issues, policies, and players. She is passionate about the environment and water use efficiency. And Nick also works for the Kyle Center. He creates and manages content for publicly accessible interactive online mapping applications related to water resources in the state. He graduated from ASU's Master of Urban and Environmental Planning program. Previously, Nick has worked in Parks and Recreation and Environmental Education with the National Park Service, Arizona State Parks and Trails in Coconino County. His professional and academic experiences reflect a passion for public service and environmental stewardship. Nick looks forward to contributing his planning and GIS expertise to more projects that impact decision-making, quality of life, and quality of the environment. So welcome, thank you both. Nick, I assume you're going to be sharing your screen? Excellent. Right. I've made you presenter. You should be able to share.
Right, are you able to see my screen?
I am, and we can hear you beautifully.
Thank you for that introduction.
All right, thanks, Jenna. Hi, everyone. We're really happy to be sharing our groundwater app with this group. As Jenna said, I'm a water policy analyst for ASU's Kyle Center for Water Policy at the Morrison Institute for Public Policy, and I'm co-presenting with my colleague, Nick. He's actually the developer of this great new tool. And his background in planning and GIS has really been invaluable to the Kyle Center, and he's really doing fabulous work. So we're going to tag team the presentation. I'm going to introduce the tool and then wrap up the presentation. And Nick's going to do the walkthrough of the app and show you how to use it. So right now, I feel like with water, we are really at an inflection point where we need to work smarter and we need to be more efficient. So we're hopeful that this tool will help us all of us do just that. It provides access to data and visualizations, which leads to improved knowledge, better, easier discussions, and hopefully really our goal is that it will help drive important policy decisions on sustainable groundwater management. A few quick words on who we are. The Kyle Center for Water Policy is part of the Morrison Institute at ASU. The Morrison Institute's been around for 40 years this year. It's our anniversary, and our mission is to promote informed public dialogue to gain insight on critical policy issues. Our focus at the Kyle Center is specific to water, and we see our work as a nonpartisan public service and realize how important it is to understand the historical context in everything that we do. Before we dive into the new groundwater level change app, I want to show you a quick video on the Arizona Water Blueprint. It's the Kyle Center signature project. All of our story maps and this groundwater app are part of this bigger blueprint. And I'm showing this video because it does a much better job summarizing how much the blueprint has to offer than I can do in 3 minutes. And there's a sneak peek of the app just to spark your interest as we go through. So we'll show this quick video.
Many Arizonans worry about our state's water supply and wonder if we're going to have enough water for the long haul. The Arizona Water Blueprint website helps answer questions about water supply and use by creating a holistic view of water in Arizona. With just a few clicks, you can explore Arizona's water landscape and learn about Arizona's water resources and infrastructure. The Blueprint website offers interactive maps, rich with data, and a gallery of guided learning experiences on discrete water topics. The Blueprint combines over 55 data layers into one map. It unlocks data from spreadsheets and PDFs and makes it visual and understandable for the average Arizonan. For instance, if you wanted to better understand the Rio Salado corridor in Maricopa County, the Blueprint can show you dams and reservoirs, rivers and streams, important bird areas, reservation and municipal boundaries, and water treatment facilities, among many other features. One way the Blueprint makes data easy to understand is through data dashboards. These dashboards combine multiple data sources on a single interface so that trends are visualized. Take a look at this example. This dashboard shows the water demand in Arizona's active management areas, which are regions where groundwater is regulated. For each active management area, you can see how much water is being used every year by type of water user. The guided learning experiences are another easy-to-use feature. We've created concise introductions to hot water topics, such as water use in rural areas and infrastructure concepts that could expand water supplies in Arizona. Our introduction to the health and function of watersheds drills down into the complex relationship between land and water by examining forest health, wildfires, climate change, and our state's unique biodiversity. Many of the water questions Arizonans are curious about right now can be informed by the information on the Blueprint. One of the biggest water questions facing Arizona communities today is the sustainability of groundwater supplies. Groundwater is a critical resource in Arizona, and changes in demand for groundwater have given rise to growing concern about the long-term resilience of some of the state's aquifers. The Arizona Groundwater Level Change app shows what's happening in subbasins across the state, where groundwater levels are rising or declining, and where more data may be needed. We invite you to explore the Blueprint website at azwaterblueprint.asu.edu.
So yeah, if you haven't had a chance to check out the blueprint already, we really think it's a fantastic resource that gets better almost daily. We just had a story map that we released yesterday, and I'm going to give you show you a screenshot of that as well. But let's talk briefly about the significance of groundwater in Arizona. It is 40% of our state's water supply. You're obviously all here and tuned in because you're concerned or care about natural resources, about water. And I think they know that there's a reason why we have so many people interested. I mean, we live in a semi-arid to arid state, which essentially means that groundwater is a non-renewable resource, and we really need to be preserving our groundwater. Next slide, Nick. Thanks. Now we're dealing with our first ever shortage on the Colorado River. Here's that sneak peek. This is the story map that we released yesterday about the impacts of the Colorado River shortage. I think it's a really nice resource to either better understand what's going to happen with what's happening with the shortage, or help others understand better. So the Colorado River is, this other almost 40% of our water supply. So we've got long-term drought impacting our renewable surface water. We have increasing demand for water, and then cuts to our Colorado River supply. It's a lot. So next slide. In Arizona, the Colorado River shortage discussion is really all about groundwater. With less Colorado River water being delivered through the Central Arizona Project, groundwater pumping is going to continue to increase, and increased groundwater pumping is reducing the availability, of course, of this finite water supply for our future needs. Next slide. We see a lot of headlines about groundwater and increases in demand. People are getting more and more concerned about this critical resource. And the bottom line is that we already have areas where our groundwater supplies are stressed, and we're continuing to face even greater challenges. The only big difference in the headlines that you see with Lake Mead and the Colorado River shortage is that you usually see, you see these pictures, you see these iconic bathtub rings. These are, the stark evidence of the reservoir's declining levels. But with groundwater, it's certainly harder for people to grasp, and we don't see these images as a result of these headlines. But if we could see with our own eyes, perhaps we could understand what's happening with groundwater and be able to be more informed and to have these better conversations, which will lead us to better solutions. That's really one of the main reasons why we think this tool that we created is so incredibly valuable. Next slide. This tool provides visualizations of changes in groundwater levels across the state, and shows that some basins that may be of concern or in distress, as well as the data gaps. We think that this resource can be used by the general public, water managers, and decision makers to understand groundwater concerns and really support decision making and hopefully effective policy to further us. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nick to show you the app and how to use it.
Thanks, Susan. So I'm going to lead us all through a tour of the Groundwater app, which is available through the Kyle Center's Arizona Water Blueprint website. If you've used the Blueprint map before, you'll recognize a similar layout. But what this app does is focus specifically on groundwater level changes across Arizona's subbasins. It does this over a 1-year, 10-year, and 20-year time interval between 1998 and 2018. And subbasins are symbolized based on the median rate of groundwater level change. We see subbasins experiencing a declining rate of change in red, those experiencing an increasing rate of change, blue, and subbasins experiencing a rate of change of less than 1 foot in either direction are a neutral tan color. Subbasins without reported groundwater level data are gray. The underlying data comes from a report published by the Arizona Department of Water Resources in December 2020. It's a fantastic, comprehensive report with detailed tables and beautiful static maps. The goal of the Kyle Center was to sort of unlock this information, breathe some new life into it, make it easier to explore and understand through an interactive web-based tool. So a big thanks goes out to the folks at ADWR, Terry Davis and her field services team, especially. They all provided critical input and feedback along the way. We'll dive in a little bit. So there are individual wells displayed on the map according to water level change values, how the depth to water measurement has changed over time. Blue for increasing, red for decreasing, and green for change of less than 1 foot. The size of the well symbol reflects the magnitude of change. Taking these values, we were able to symbolize the subbasins by median rate of change. And this provides a sort of summary snapshot of groundwater conditions in the state. The median rate of change is calculated by determining the median water level change value among all wells measured in a subbasin and dividing that value by the number of years in the specified time period. So here's an example. It's a fairly straightforward calculation. Depth to water was measured in 12 wells in the Gila Bend subbasin, listed here with their well IDs. So they were measured in 1998 and again in 2018. Difference between these two measurements is a well's 20-year water level change. We find the median or middle value of all of these water level change measurements. We find that to be negative 64.9. We divide that number by the rate, in this case 20 years, to determine that the median rate of change was negative 3.2 feet per year. So as we saw on the right side of the last slide, the beauty of this app is that all this information is summarized, easy to read, and just a click away. We click on the map feature to view pop-ups. This one reads, in the Wilcox subbasin over a 20-year period, the median rate of groundwater level change was negative 2.2 feet per year. We can then take a look at individual wells. We spot the blue one, the one that increased over this time period. We can click on a well like this one and see between 1998 and 2018, this well's water level declined by 81.4 feet. And there are links that take you to ADWR's records for this well and hydrographs, which show monitored water levels over time. When considering the overall condition of a subbasin, there are many factors to take into account. Context is key, so in an effort to bring in more pieces of the puzzle, we've included a category of contextual layers. So we can look at things like ADWR's current groundwater site inventory layer. We can look at things like depth to bedrock contour lines and areas of land subsidence. We can turn on city boundaries and look at how populations have changed over the past 40 years. The county boundaries layer includes a link to a dashboard by the Department of Environmental Quality. There are more layers for tribal lands, major rivers and streams, underground storage facilities, and more that have been added even since this video was made. The Frequently Asked Questions tab at the top right provides the background information that I've shared, plus links to resources, tips, and tutorials. Tutorials introduce some of the tools in the toolbox that can be used to really leverage the power of this application. Of course, you can do things like change the base map to satellite imagery. You can also share what you've found with others by creating a unique link to a certain area on the map or to a specific feature like a well. I'll share some of the tutorial videos we have that highlight the Kyle Center's desire to serve a wide range of users with this app. When viewing multiple layers at the same time, it can be helpful to change the transparency of one or more layers. You may also want to be able to see base map features beneath certain layers. In this demo, we want to see roads and place names beneath the symbolized subbasins. So we can click on the ellipses to the right of the layer title and move the transparency slider to the right to make the layer more transparent. You can now easily see underlying base map information. The swipe tool allows a user to easily compare the content of two layers. In this app, you may want to compare median rates of water level change in subbasins between different time intervals. So I'm going to compare the 20-year rate of change and the 1-year rate of change. I'm activating these layers on the right side of the application. I'm going to click the toolbox icon in the top right. I'm going to minimize the other tools. We see the swipe tool. We can change the swipe layer using the drop down. So I'm choosing the 1-year layer to swipe on and off. Now I can click and drag the swipe tool across the map to change the visibility of the swipe layer. It's just a cool, interesting way to visually compare two data layers. As you can tell, there's a lot of information to unpack in this application. So in this demo, this tutorial, I show some ways to utilize the attribute table and the select tool. You can pull up the attribute table by clicking the arrow tab in the bottom middle of the map frame. Active layers, those that are turned on, are visible. So we're looking at 20-year water level change data for all wells across the state. You have the ability to sort the features by different attributes. You can click the field name to sort by ascending or descending. Do that with the water level change value. Find that the well that declined the most during this time period is here. You can do things like click the row to highlight the feature on the map. We can use the Zoom to button to take a closer look. Clear our selection here. And on the left side, the attribute table, there's an options menu where you can do things like export the table to Excel. Now the select tool allows you to select specific map features in order to view and download more targeted data. Let's look at wells within the McMullen Valley subbasin. So go to the toolbox, again, in the top right corner. We'll minimize the other tools. We see the wells layer for 20-year water level changes is active and already turned on. Selectability. Inactive layers are grayed out. Turn on the select tool. And we can now draw a polygon around the desired features. Click as you go to create corners. For some of us, this may take some getting used to. So if you accidentally leave something out, you can hold the Shift key and add it in. If you need to remove something from the selection, you can hold the Control key. Get that out of there. Now that I have all the wells in the McMullen Valley subbasin selected, go back over to my select menu, click the ellipses, and view an attribute table, only these selected features. And then export that to an Excel file. Carroll Center hopes that with GIS technology and this application, we can help a broader audience visualize what's happening and where. So as Susan mentioned, we can all start talking about solutions. For example, this tool can be used and is being used already in conversations that are happening in places like Cochise County and Mojave County, which Susan is going to tell us more about.
Thanks, Nick. So hopefully you all see how I think incredibly valuable the tool can be. So we're going to talk for a few minutes about why it's so important, and some ways, more ways you could use it, and like Nick said, some ways that people are already using it. So I was just going to start with a little bit on the Groundwater Management Act. Many of you, if not most of, or all of you, are familiar with the Groundwater Management Act. In 1980, Arizona passed landmark legislation to manage groundwater in the most populous areas of our state. And the Groundwater Management Management Act designated 5 areas as active management areas. These active management areas are where groundwater, like the act says, is managed. There's no new irrigated ag. There's limits on new wells, regulation that growth must occur on renewable supplies, and there's mandatory conservation. And although the Groundwater Management Act truly did some amazing things for Arizona, we couldn't be where we are without it. The problem that it was enacted to address, which was groundwater mining, that's still persisting in areas. Next slide. And meanwhile, most rural parts of the state have no groundwater regulation. We actually have another story map I did want to bring to your attention on the issues or hotspots in Arizona's rural areas. And I'll put those, the 2 links to our 2 story maps in the chat here as soon as we're done. Next slide. I'm going to highlight 2 of those hotspots in our rural area, our rural water story map, and show you how the app can be used to study and investigate what's happening in these areas. So in the southeastern corner of Arizona, Cochise County has seen a big increase in groundwater dependent agriculture. It's a combination of large-scale industrial farms and small-scale vineyards. According to one study, the rate of withdrawal is now around 4 to 5 times the rate of recharge. And experts say water levels could fall as much as 917 feet. And when you think about what's happening here, and you think about, the potential of deepening some of these domestic wells, it's very expensive. It's estimated to cost between $15,000 to $30,000. We feel like this tool is a way that people can understand the issues that are happening here in Cochise County. And also, I should also add that many of you know that this in the Wilcox Basin, groundwater basin in Cochise County, has the highest rate of land subsidence. And I think part of what we were showing there shows that as well. In Mojave County, and moving to the northwest of our state, there's an influx of large-scale irrigated agriculture as well in Mojave County, and it's dramatically increased the demand for groundwater. And until recently, modeling by the city of Kingman showed that the aquifer could supply the municipality, which at the time was the only major groundwater user, for hundreds of years. In the last 7 or so years, or probably more like 10 now, but farming operations have drilled some hundreds of industrial scale wells, and the water table's rate of decline has increased swiftly. Next slide. So there's currently a campaign in motion in Cochise County. They're working to create a groundwater management areas in the Douglas and Wilcox groundwater basins. And essentially they have to have 10% of the people who registered voters sign a petition to get this to an election. And we felt like, okay, here's the way that the tool can be used. Wouldn't it be great to be able to actually educate, inform the folks that are going to be potentially considering signing this petition, and showing them the app? This is factual information, and really utilize this to perhaps make some different policy changes into the future and help them, if they decide they want to, get some regulation in the area. So we actually have met with the campaign manager and a few of their folks within the group and have showed them how to use how to use the app. You know, our original suggestion was, why don't you walk around with iPads door to door and show people? Well, you know, easier said than done with technology, but they are planning to, I haven't seen it yet, but they are planning to do some screenshots and some communication materials that they're able to share with people that live in the area to educate them. So we really, I hope that it's being used in this way. Of course, there's many other ways that we can think to educate people about groundwater as well, utilizing the tool. Next slide. But really, you know, here, I mean, the deal is if Arizona is going to prosper into the next century, our focus really needs to be on the preservation of groundwater resources. And we really think that this tool is a step in the right direction where people can know the problems and work to address them. I mean, as Nick said, and yeah, I see some folks from DWR, many of them are friends. I mean, such great work that's being produced and, you know, really great data. And hopefully we've just been able to take it to the next level where we're showing it visually. And that's really all we've done here with the work that they've done. Next slide. So I'm just going to leave you with this. It's a quote from Jeff Inwood. He's ADWR's chief hydrologist. And I think his summary is spot on. So I'm paraphrasing. But the app takes reams of raw data that ADWR gathers and gives meaning for the general public, non-technical people that previously was difficult to display and understand. And essentially, we're able to reach a far wider audience with this information. Our team feels really strongly that we need this all hands on deck approach right now. Information's key. We're at a critical moment in time where we need to work harder and we need to work smarter, more efficiently, and that we hope that everyone will use the blueprint and all of its tools to get more informed if that's what you need, but really to also, especially for this group, you know, to help educate others and help them understand through these tools that I know this group is often creating. I mean, I'm very new to GIS and I see so much power in what these tools can do for us. So I'm super excited to be working with these tools, and I'm excited to hear what you all have to say as well, but really educate others on water and water policy in Arizona so that we can make some changes for the future and what needs to be done. So we thank you all so much. We're happy to take questions. I did see a question pop up in the chat, but appreciate you listening in on about our tool.
Thank you, Susan. That was amazing and really great to know the details about the tool. And thank you, Nick. Well done presentation. So we do have one question. Well, we have two questions, but one of them was answered by one of our experts in the audience. The one that remains is from Aline, and she says, Douglas is in an INA, irrigation non-expansion area. What would be different if it became an AMA?
DWR, no. That's actually a really good question. I don't know if I'm able to tell you exactly offhand all of the differences, but if we have any more questions, I can definitely pull up something where I've got some information that I'd be happy to tell you a little bit more. I mean, yeah, I would feel better about me just taking a peek and then getting right back to you.
I think that's great, Susan. You can add it to the chat so that everybody has an idea. That would be perfect. So thank you again. I really appreciate you presenting for us today. It was very insightful.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so we are right on track with our very full agenda. It is my pleasure to introduce Jay Corum. He is from the Phoenix office of the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. He is also one of our co-chairs for the Natural Resources Workgroup. Jay is, now I'm going to get into his bio and the specifics of it. So He leads the GIS team at the Bureau of Reclamation Phoenix area office and is a member of the Bureau of Reclamation's GIS technical advisory team. Jay got his start as a topographic analyst in the U.S. Army and has been working in the GIS field for over 20 years. He is a Geographic Information Systems Professional, GISP, graduate of the Penn State Geospatial Intelligence Program, and has a master's in public administration from Grand Canyon University. He spends his free time with his family, exploring the wilderness, gardening, and binging on Netflix. Welcome, Jay. Oh, I think you're muted. I can't hear you. There you go.
It'd be good now.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Thank you for that introduction. Let's see if I can share my screen.
Perfect. As Jay is getting set up to present, I just want to remind everybody to use the chat. I will ask Jay your questions after his presentation. Thanks.
Everybody seeing my screen all right?
Yep, I can see it perfectly. That's great.
All right, well, so kind of in the same vein as the ASU Kyle Center, the Bureau of Reclamation is also kind of worried about drought conditions in the Western United States right now. And to try to address some of that and share a lot of information about what the Bureau of Reclamation is doing in response to drought conditions, the GIS team set up this Addressing Drought Across the West web portal. It's really just kind of an information hub of everything that the Bureau of Reclamation is doing to address drought, information resources, some dashboards and stuff that were developed by the Bureau of Reclamation, some information from USGS, our partners at the EPA, some state and local partners, and it's a wealth of information. So I'm just going to go through this more so showing what's kind of available on the portal. So I have to start off with this. The Reclamation makes me use this. So a lot of people might not be too familiar with the Bureau of Reclamation. We kind of keep a low profile. So the mission of the Bureau of Reclamation is to manage, develop, and protect water and related resources in an environmentally and economically sound manner in the interest of the United States. All right, so getting into the portal, one of the first things you'll see when you hit the homepage of the drought portal is the latest news and highlights. So it's kind of just a curated news feed of drought response information, Bureau of Reclamation news, current conditions, and how climate change is affecting drought in the West. So the Bureau of Reclamation is really big on collaboration with different partners. So one of the big ways that we collaborate with others is through our Water Smart program. And as of September 2021, Reclamation has selected 227 new Water Smart projects with $73.2 million in federal funding states across the West. So drought conditions across the West impact a wide range of communities and sectors, including farmers, cities, tribes, environment, recreation, hydropower, producers, public, and others. Given the widespread impacts, collaboration with customers, partners, and stakeholders is critical to identifying successful drought mitigation strategies. Collaboration is central to Reclamation's approach to addressing drought in the West. Reclamation collaborates with water users on water management improvements, water reuse and recycling projects, reservoir operations, the development of science and tools, water supply planning, and more. Some of Reclamation's program activities are highlighted on the collaboration page in the Addressing Drought Hub. One of the other ways we also collaborate is through our Research and Development Office. The Research and Development Office applies science and technology to advance the agency's mission to manage, develop, and protect water. These programs use a combination of internal projects, external calls for proposals, and prize competitions to support innovation, addressing drought via enhanced monitoring, improved forecasting, and technology research to support development of new supplies. In the past 6 years, R&D has launched 30 prize competitions and awarded more than $3.5 million. There's information about specific drought actions in the portal. Reclamation is taking a comprehensive approach to address historic drought conditions impacting the 17 western states, recognizing that no single action or solution will adequately address the problem. Reclamation is supporting an across-the-board approach to address drought on multiple fronts. This includes collaboration with partners to develop new water supply and infrastructure projects, the development of new forecasting and modeling tools, a range of water management improvements from software, maximizing the amount of hydropower produced with available water supplies, to water reuse and recycling projects. And also long-term planning to develop innovative strategies to address hydrologic changes. New water supply projects are an important aspect of an all-of-the-above approach to drought, providing safe and adequate water supplies to communities reliant on supplies that may not be available during times of drought, and underserved communities that have identified continuing needs into the future. This includes new storage projects where appropriate and other infrastructure projects to build climate resiliency and reduce reliance on declining water sources. Reclamation has approximately 350 active construction activities underway, including new delivery systems and storage, dam safety projects, recreation rehabilitation activities, and other major replacements and repairs. Information about reservoir operations. Reservoir managers work to optimize water storage to meet designated needs while maintaining enough space in the reservoir for flood control management. Historically, water control manuals have dictated the amount of reserved flood control space based on local historical weather patterns that do not account for changing hydrological conditions. Now, advances in forecasting are providing a new opportunity for forecast-based reservoir operations where conditions and infrastructure align. Reclamation is working to optimize reservoir operations to respond to drought through temporary operational adjustments within existing constraints in the short term and through the use of forecast-informed reservoir operations in the longer term. Hydropower resiliency. Hydropower is it's crucial for stabilizing the interconnected electrical grid in the West and can rapidly respond to system emergencies. As the second largest producer of hydroelectric power in the United States, Reclamation supplies 40 million megawatt hours of electricity each year on average. In order to maintain hydropower production during times of drought, it is critical to optimize the amount of power that can be produced with available water supplies. Reclamation's hydropower optimization system enhances Reclamation's capabilities by improving power output efficiency while conserving water. Water conservation and efficiency projects are crucial to ensuring adequate water supplies during drought and are used by many Western states to supplement or avoid the development of new water supplies. These projects support a wide range of water management activities, including lining or piping of canals, installation of advanced measuring devices, irrigation system automation, installation of residential water meters, and activities that reduce urban water use. Water recycling projects can provide growing communities with new sources of clean water, increasing flexibility and diversifying the water supply. Reclamation has several funding opportunities that support water reuse and desalinization, including through the WaterSmart Title 16 Water Reclamation and Reuse Program and the WaterSmart Desalinization Construction Program and the Desalinization and Water Purification Program. Developing alternative water supplies is critical to build drought resiliency and adapt to climate change. Diversifying a water portfolio decreases vulnerabilities while increasing water supply reliability. Diverse water supplies enhance water management flexibilities and are critical during dry and drought periods. A diversified water portfolio will look different from region to region, but common diversification projects include pipes that allow for water movement between neighboring districts or utilities to support voluntary transfers and exchanges. Other diversification tools include aquifer recharge facilities to support sustainable conjunctive use programs in water banking, stormwater capture, and other adaptive management practices. So planning for drought and developing science and tools to better understand drought risk helps reclamation and water managers in the West build resilience in advance of drought and to manage water during drought. Severe droughts can last decades, like in the Colorado River Basin, where a historic drought has continued since 2000. Science development and long-term planning can help water managers understand how today's droughts differ from the past and anticipate increases in the severity, duration, frequency of drought due to climate change. The impact of current drought on reclamation's reservoirs has been substantial. Most facilities realizing below average inflows. Storage across the West is also below average at many facilities in California and in the Colorado River Basin. Multiple reservoirs have reached 30-year storage lows for this time of year. The interactive reservoir storage dashboard that's located within this addressing drought portal provides current conditions for 44 major reclamation reservoirs and comparisons with historical storage data. In addition, the reservoir map shows current storage at selected reclamation reservoirs. So the U.S. Drought Monitor and Drought Intensity over Time, 2021. This map shows the most recent drought monitor for the 11 westernmost states where reclamation operates. Currently, most of this domain is experiencing some level of drought, with over half of the region in either D3 or D4, two of the most severe drought levels as defined by the USDM. When both the spatial extent and severity of drought are considered, current conditions in this region are the most severe since the inception of the USDM in 1999. In addition, the High Plains portion of reclamation domain, notably North and South Dakota, is also experiencing record drought conditions. The current drought is driven in large part by below average precipitation across much of the West, coupled with consistently above average spring temperatures that have persisted into the summer months. Soil moisture conditions are both an indicator and driver of the current drought. In fall of 2020, soil moisture deficits were observed across much of the western United States. These conditions have resulted in widespread below average runoff and water supply for much of the West. Climate change is altering the weather and stream flow patterns that frame the development of water and power systems across the West. Reclamation's 2021 Secure Water Act report includes a drought-specific analysis using paleohydrology, which is tree rings, combined with projections of future climate conditions. The findings show that in the western United States, the duration, severity, and frequency of drought will increase in the future. All of this information and more can be found at the Bureau of Reclamation's Addressing Drought dashboard. And I will post this link in the chat, make it easier for you to find. And here is my contact information. If anybody would like to reach out to me after this presentation.
Thank you, Jay. That's an incredible resource. I'm really grateful that you shared that with us today. So nice job. Apparently you were so thorough, no one has any questions for you. So you did an excellent job. Thank you. Next up on our agenda, we're going to take a break for just a few minutes, and then we will welcome Laura Norman. I am absolutely thrilled to have with us Dr. Laura Norman from USGS. Laura is a supervisory research physical scientist at the U.S. Geologic Survey, where she has worked since 1998. Her research combines remotely sensed imagery and other geospatial data in complex hydrologic, hydraulic, and LULC models to predict the source, fate, and transport of non-point source pollutants, consider potential growth scenarios, and document impacts of change. Laura, welcome. I'm really grateful to have you today. Oh, and I think you're muted. We can't hear you. Still muted. It may be because you're sharing your screen. There's a menu bar at the very top with WebEx. If you pull that down, there should be an option for you to unmute.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. We can hear you now.
I have a problem with presenting, I guess. Let's see. Okay, am I still presenting, or can you still see my screen? Yeah.
Yep, I can see the screen without a problem. That's
Okay.
great.
Let's see if I can get this back going then. Oh, now I'm sharing that screen.
Yeah, WebEx can be a little challenging.
Yeah, I usually we use OneDrive or something.
Oh, okay. Sorry, guys. Hopefully
That's
everybody's
okay.
just like coming back from the bathroom right now.
Right. We've got plenty of time. So, and these things happen, so no worries. Yep, there you go. I can see it again.
All
That's
right, all
perfect.
right. Sorry about that. Yeah, I totally appreciated the last couple presentations, and so excited to try out the new tools that were presented. So thank you so much to the previous presenters, and I had my internet browser going already, trying to look up my study areas. But now I'm going to be presenting something completely different. So I've been using GIS for 20 something years, and trying to look at different hydrological applications. So the study that I'm presenting is a study that I've been working on for the past 12 years, looking at the ecohydrology of rock detention structures. So you're probably wondering, what is she talking about with rock detention structures? So I'll go through a little bit about what they are, and like the pictures portray, they're check dams and gabions that have been well documented and internationally utilized for hundreds of years by different agencies. I've got some pictures here from my field sites. This is a structure that we call a leaky weir. And so it's kind of like a dam, but it actually doesn't impound water. It's allowing water to leak through slowly, and holding back sediment and just slowing it down. Gabions you might have seen in the past, very similar, allow water to go through the rocks. It is rock structures that are wrapped up in wire cages. And check dams, which are smaller structures that are put into stream channels and loose rock structures in this case. And there's also one rock dams. So these are pictures of some one rock dams that are laid into channels, as well as this Zuni bowl. And some of this was designed by 𝐀𝐫𝐢𝐳𝐚 and 𝐀𝐫𝐢𝐳𝐵 from Roskin style natural channel design things. This is trincheras. These are little hill slope kind of one rock dams that are set up on the side of the hills to control erosion. Earthen berms. I think everybody might have seen these, probably stock pond created or wildlife waters around southeast Arizona. Getting back to those detention structures I had mentioned, the Roskin style. Roskin was a U.S. Forest Service hydrologist who developed the method for classifying streams in the 60s, and he teaches restoration classes based on this natural channel design approach. They're often required by agencies issuing stream permits, but in the desert Southwest, Bill 𝐀𝐫𝐢𝐳, who's also a retired Forest Service, and Van 𝐀𝐫𝐲 in New Mexico have modified this to promote increased meander using smaller but also low-tech structures. So these are different rock detention structures. But you can't forget about the beaver, who, by damming streams, create and enhance wetland habitat. So in August 1950, beaver paratroopers were actually launched by the Idaho Department of Fish and Game as outpost agents of flood control and soil conservation. And nowadays they are brought in a little less aerodynamically, but agencies are reintroducing beavers into strategic locations for the benefit of wildlife, fisheries, and local water users. So there's just some introduction in the San Pedro with Watershed Management Group that looks like it's very successful. We were able to monitor this little beaver in the Baba Kumari, a tributary of the San Pedro, but you can see the beautiful dam that he built there, and he was very busy in the pictures and enjoying his little pond there. So detention structures aren't a new technology. Indigenous communities in the southwestern U.S. and Mexico had used rock dams to grow their crops and control erosion and flooding for many, many years. Archaeologists have identified structures dating back 1,000 years before the Common Era. Last October, our group at the USGS had the pleasure to go for a walk with Drs. Paul and Susie Fish from the School of Anthropology at the University of Arizona, and they showed us some terraced fields around Tucson where Hohokam people had used rock structures to grow agave for fiber, wood, and alcohol, some dating back to 1500 BC. So not a new technology, but despite all of the qualitative reports documenting the presence and impacts of these structures by the archaeologists and also by local restoration practitioners, there's some need for metrics associated with products and science that are required for agencies. So to try to leverage dollars with. And so we started working on the Aridland water harvesting project to provide those kinds of results describing impacts of various management practices on water, soils, and vegetation. And we're working with a large consortium of local agencies, and you guys are welcome to join if anybody is interested, to share and integrate conservation efforts in the Madrean Sky Island archipelago ecoregion. And I began to evaluate condition and prioritize areas with this group called the Sky Island Restoration Cooperative, although now we're kind of seeming to go outside of our ecoregion as this group is growing, but to prioritize different areas and identify methods for restoration treatment that could be collaborated on. So using the science now termed ecohydrology, a subdiscipline of hydrology that focuses on ecological processes occurring within the hydrologic cycle and strives to utilize such processes for enhancing environmental sustainability. So ecohydrology. The general assumption of ecohydrology is to reverse degradation and achieve sustainable water and ecosystems in anthropogenically modified basins. Okay, so now I'll get into the fun stuff. I'm going to present our research methods and some findings of the Aridland Water Harvesting Project, most of which are geospatial or provide data to create geospatial products. So starting with remote sensing analysis. Here's an example of what people on the ground have been seeing over time. So these gabion structures were installed over 25 years ago in the San Bernardino watershed, and both the U.S. side in the National Wildlife Refuge and on the Sonoran side in Mexico at Cuenca Los Ojos. So you can see the impacts qualitatively are pretty convincing of these structures to do some rehabilitation of the channel. We use the Landsat imagery over time to look at change, and specifically using the normalized difference vegetation index to look at vegetation health around structures as an indicator of water availability. So we partitioned out areas around the study area to observe that were treated with gabions and selected areas that had not been treated as controls. So the treated are the green little blobs there, and the controls are the red blobs. Over the 27-year study, we went back in time and documented, following the red line, the vegetation died or declined at most of our control sites, so correlating with declines in precipitation that are charted in blue. And then following the green line, the vegetation was maintained and improved at most of our targets that were treated with structures. So despite drought conditions, which was wonderful. So looking spatially at the control versus treated in this map, the treated sites were delineated with a little X It's kind of hard to see on the brown, but there's not that many on the little brown circles. So the brown is representing a decrease in health, so larger is more decrease, and the green is representing an increase in vegetation. So, and as larger circles, they're more increase. And this brought our attention down here. Downstream from where there was no structures, where there was an increase in vegetation at the channel, whereas you can see adjacent to that, there's that tiny little brown, so not much is happening otherwise. So we went back in and added another index, the NDII in this case, to look at wetted areas. So this was something that Natalie Wilson had used for her master's thesis and was able to discern wetlands in the Cienega Creek watershed. But here she used it to extend our study and better examine upstream and downstream zones around structures. And our analysis reiterated the potential of structures to support healthy vegetation that we had seen before. And and extended results to include areas up to 5 kilometers downstream of structures and 1 kilometer upstream. So that's a pretty big deal for people interested in hydrology and drought, as the structures were making more water available for plants over time. Okay, so we also use the terrestrial LiDAR equipment that everybody is probably familiar with, to collect dimensions of study areas in terms of baseline geomorphology and created a time series to analyze that change. So for example, here's what a gabion structure installed at Vaughan Canyon looks like in a 3-dimensional model on the left. On the right is a map of spatial change over time at a channel in Patagonia at the Deep Dirt Farm Institute. The laser scanning provides high-resolution quantification of change that can portray how structures impact erosion and sediment patterns. So structures are inside the circles here on the right and are increased elevation installed after the first survey. But you can note the deposition in between and erosion up and downstream. So using the terrestrial LiDAR to create very high-resolution DEMS and looking at differencing there. At a number of study sites, we've also employed the popular drone technology to acquire understanding of baseline conditions, both in the geomorphology and also in vegetation cover. So at Silver Creek in the Whitewater Draw watershed, this was very useful to consider how a huge storm impacted the One Rock dams that had been installed north of the border. So repeat flyovers to get digital terrain models from those surveys. And at a study that we're doing at Wilcox, we're using those DTMs to exact change in the channel, but also in concert with instrumentation in the streams for calculating discharge over time. So that's another great exciting use. We're implementing and developing low-cost methods for monitoring impacts that can be more efficient for remote locations and that provide data or input for geospatial models. So I'm going to describe some of that monitoring that we're doing on the ground as well. So at the El Coronado Ranch in the Chiricahua Mountains, a rancher had installed 2,000 or more check dams in a 700-hectare watershed. So we developed a paired watershed study there to compare impacts with a watershed that had no structures. We installed a modified continuous slope area gauge to calculate stage. That was developed by the USGS and the Arizona Water Science Center. And using multiple point locations for that stage estimates were surveyed cross sections and estimates of channel roughness. In each of the paired watershed outlets, we calculated estimates of discharge. Our results portrayed a decrease in average flashiness related to peak flows in the treated watershed for small to medium flood events. So an increased surface water availability in the treated watershed by extending the duration and the season of flow events, as well as increased volumes by 28%. So I'm going to step through this if you're interested, but if you can picture kind of like a summer with a normal monsoon, if you can remember that. In July, we saw runoff occurring in the control, but not in the treated watershed. So it was harvesting water. In August, the percent rainfall to runoff was about equal in both watersheds. But in September, the treated watershed was portraying more than double that percent ratio and kept going when the control watershed was not flowing. So water was held in the system and slowly released over time, again showing that detention structures are a climate adaptation strategy that combats drought. In 2015, we are working at the 𝐀𝐫𝐢𝐳𝐸 Ranch at the San Pedro to identify recharge potential of structures with Borderlands Restoration Network, funded by the Walton Family Foundation. A master's student from the U of A worked with us to instrument a gabion with wildlife cameras, buried temperature loggers, and pressure transducers, and estimated an increased soil moisture at gabions by about 10%. And in Phoenix, Arizona, we were studying the impacts of One Rock dams with Deborah Toslin at the Bureau of Reclamation. She had established a system using pressure transducers, gauges, weather stations, cameras, and the models that were run there portrayed decreases in peak flows and increases in infiltration at structures. And the results also suggested a 3-degree microclimate cooling effect for at least 2 days following rainfall events at treated sites. This climate mitigation strategy of installing rock detention structures would likely have cumulative cooling effects as vegetation takes hold. And back at the Cienega Ranch, we've doubled and tripled our measurements over time to compare the parts of the water budget in starting in 2019, really. And I'm also working with a student in hydrology at the university, Diana Shea, who is analyzing isotope signatures behind structures and in the wells for her thesis to determine if mountain front recharge is being amplified by structures, and seeing some positive preliminary results that she is intending to defend this spring. So hopefully we can have a publication to go through at that time. In 2015, we launched a field campaign at 6 study areas to document vegetation changes that was spearheaded by Natalie Wilson. Within plots, nested quadrats were used to measure frequency and quantify abundance during the monsoons. Basal and foliar cover classes were also recorded for each quadrat to create short-term local response estimates at structures. Preliminary results from this research show increases in perennial vegetation. So that's mimicking the remote sensing analysis that I just described. This 5-year data collection was released this year, and we're examining changes in abundance right now, changes in wetland species and invasives. The surprising and exciting finding here is that the plants being established are water-loving wetland plants that are indicative of high water tables at structures. We are also exploring how sediment deposition at structures might influence soil carbon storage by analyzing isotope ratios of carbon and nitrogen. So James Calligary is the lead on this part of the project, and his results portray check dams and gabions increasing carbon cycling and soil carbon storage within treated watersheds. So also of interest here, watersheds treated by structures prior to wildfire demonstrate significant increases of stored carbon. All right, and now to move on to research methods that I'm using more actively in watershed modeling geospatially. Oops. At Amos Nogales, flooding is an annual issue that threatens livelihoods and lives of people living in environmental justice communities. And given current climate predictions for more intense storm events in between droughts, this precarious issue is poised to get more dire. A long time ago, in 2010, I had established an initial model iteration that identified locations for potential human intervention and risk. In this case, areas we see that are higher runoff could be expected would be areas that might be useful to treat by flood management. And following that, the U.S. International Boundary and Water Commission commissioned us to determine efficacy of flood control structures at selected locations using that same model. And in this example, at Cuesta Blanca, peak flows were reduced for a small event, a 10-year, 1-hour event. But as different size storms are pushed through the model, the efficacy was reduced and eventually negated in the 100-year, 6-hour event. So we had the idea there that more structures, perhaps, or larger structures would be useful. Our results did portray high sediment deposition at all of the proposed structures and identified a need for regular maintenance to ensure sustainability. So that was really a big finding at the time and led to more research. But there has been a lot of updates to this, including an emergency flood warning system and new data acquisition that is being spearheaded by Floyd Gray at Nogales, getting some discharge and rainfall measurements now. Last year, I was working with Dr. Francisco Lara at Arizona State University, who I have collaborated with in the past, and others. But we were funded last year to by the NADBank to extend the model results and evaluate and advance a green or gray infrastructure to reduce and control transboundary flows during wet weather at Nogales. I'm now working with the U.S. Consulate in Nogales as a climate-related Embassy Science Fellow to try to help integrate some of these findings into the new agenda being suggested by the mayor there. So models can estimate areas of high surface runoff, sediment yield and percolation distributed in watersheds. It saves time and money from the previous approach, which was to kind of just hope that it worked at that location or, use kind of intuitive knowledge. But models can allow you to get an idea what flows might look like in different scenarios, and then you can tailor or install structures and sizes appropriately. And that's, kind of an iterative and adaptive approach, working with different restoration practitioners or floodplain managers or landowners. So estimates of surface runoff, sediment yield, and percolation can be made and distributed in watersheds. So for example, based on these predictions, restoration practitioners and engineers can determine where they should be. So you can see some estimates there of sediment yield or peak flow that might be occurring at different locations in the watershed. Using the field measurements that I described earlier from Chloe Fandel's master thesis that demonstrated an increased soil moisture at gabions, averaging about 10% increase of infiltration, I wove that back into larger watershed model and estimated the potential of watershed-wide gabion installation that could increase total aquifer recharge by at least 4% here, with noted increases at structures and subsurface connectivity and accentuated lateral flow contributions. So the model portrayed a lot of increased soil water storage at gabions. My findings portray the lateral flow bank storage as greatly impacted and the crux of all the benefits of water storage that contribute to overall watershed restoration. Check dams are known to impact routing processes, altering the fate and transport of water quality constituents like sediment and nutrients. So I used the soil and water assessment tool SWAT using the discharge measurements that we collected from the field in our paired watershed study in the 𝐀𝐫𝐢𝐳𝐵 to extrapolate and extend the analysis over a 3-year simulation to examine the impact of structures on sediment yield. Model results depict a minimum precipitation event of just over 1/2 inch to instigate the detachment of soil, sediments, or rock from the study area, which occurred only about 2% of the total time. So mean annual soil loss, despite that small amount of time, mean annual soil loss in the treated watershed was predicted to be 792 tons per year, where 210 tons of sediment was estimated to be stored behind the check dams per year. So it would take 5 years for the structures to capture 1,000 tons of sediment, which is how much this boulder weighs. And I don't know if you can see that little person there, but it's a very large boulder. In this watershed restoration effort, when structures reach sediment capacity, the practitioner advocates maintenance by installing new structures on top. Using the sediment yield estimates derived from that model and taking into account the size of the watershed and number of structures, we used James isotope analysis results to estimate the rate of carbon capture for rock detention structures, and that was averaged 200 to 250 metric tons per hectare. That is equivalent to what is stored in wetlands. And everybody knows wetlands have a lot of ecosystem services that they can provide. Okay, so using the terrestrial LiDAR we collected in the field, I applied the IRIC model. So that's International River Interface Cooperative Model. And I used the model solver that's called 𝐀𝐫𝐢𝐳 to predict change in stream flows and stages based on the changed elevation that we had quantified there. So here I am portraying the depths of water predicted, the color change and velocity when a small event is simulated. You can see locations of rock detention structures are shown by little black circles. On the left, I'm showing the geomorphology in 2013 with simulated gabion and one rock structures. On the right, in 2015, when the structures were actually installed, sediment had shifted and the same discharge was simulated. So the model allowed us to identify where water would be pushed to breach the channel on the left, so gabions could be installed in higher elevations there. The model also portrayed increases in depth of water harvested and decreased velocity when gabions were installed. The same model could also predict bed form shift and geomorphology changes around the structures. So the map on the left depicts erosion and sediment results from the model iteration run on the 2013 dam. And on the right is the actual differencing that was done with different LiDAR, repeat LiDAR surveys. So all the maps are overlain on the 2015 hillshade map and portrayed using graduated colors to show deposition gradients in blue and erosion gradients in red. So you can see there's a good similarity in locations of erosion and deposition that's predicted by the model. This was also done at El Coronado Ranch, looking at our 30-year demonstration and finding that even after 30 years on site there, that the structures didn't void their sediment capture. So here's a list of quantifiable benefits of rock detention structures that has resulted from all of this study, and it's growing. So I'm going to go through them. Decreasing peak flows for the small to medium flood events, decreased stress in plants, and increased vegetation health, increased surface water availability, even up to 5 kilometers downstream and 1 kilometer upstream from structures, extended seasonal flows and increased volumes by 28% in the case of our discharge measurements in the 𝐀𝐫𝐢𝐳, increased organic matter in soils, or could be carbon sequestration, increased soil moisture at structures by about 10%, decreased sedimentation downstream, and all of the benefit from modeling before installation occurs, in my opinion. So I presented these in a paper last December as major ecosystem services, including flood detention, habitat provisioning, water and erosion regulation, carbon sequestration, and climate regulation summarized there in that journal. But what I've learned from riparian detention structures in regards to watershed restoration and climate mitigation is that it can't occur in just one channel or using only 7 or 10 structures, but rather it's a combination of efforts maintained over time where multiple structures, in the most successful cases, hundreds and thousands of structures. I know Borderlands Restoration have installed 1,000 structures in Patagonia in the past couple of years, but they have to, so many structures have to be employed to achieve all of the benefits that they can offer. And finally, that watershed restoration requires trained practitioners installing structures on a needs-based strategy. So I have included some links on my closing slide here if you'd like to follow up with any of the subjects that I talked about today. And I'm happy to answer any questions if people are interested to pose them.
Wow, thank you, Laura. That was so informative and interesting. I'm really grateful that you've presented for us today. I think, like Jay, you must have done such an excellent job that everybody is just overwhelmed. There were no questions in the chat. Yep, there's one about videos, and yes, I will post the videos. And Laura, if you could add the link to the chat before we ring off, that would be wonderful.
I can do that.
That's great. I really appreciate you taking the time with us today. That was wonderful.
Sure.
And Jamie, I will send the PowerPoint slides out as soon as I can in a follow-up to everybody who's attended today. So thank you. I guess to wrap up, you guys are going to get some time back today, which is also kind of a gift, right? Since it's blocked on your calendars. So everybody's going to get about 20 minutes back. I think today was really informative. I want to thank all of our presenters. We learned an awful lot about what the Kyle Center is doing and how BOR is providing tools to the community. I think that's really helpful. And Laura's fabulous research. It's just amazing. So I will follow up with all of you in an email with PowerPoint slides and more information. The video will also be available on the AGIC website. So thanks, everybody. You have a great day. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.